At 55, I was about to get married for the second time and start my life over. 2 hours before the wedding, I decided to give my fiancé a romantic surprise, so I hid in the closet of the bridal suite. I realized that someone else was entering the room with my fiancé. When I recognized the voice, my heart raced. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to Elderly Stories and write in the comments. Where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My name is Sarah. I am 55 years old, and I thought I had finally found the peace I was looking for. After 15 years of widowhood, raising my son alone, and dedicating every minute of my life to the company I built from scratch, I was about to get married again. Richard was everything I ever dreamed of: kind, attentive, successful. He appeared in my life when I least expected it, at a charity event that my company sponsored at a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. It was love at first sight, or at least that is what I believed. That Saturday morning was only 3 hours away from the ceremony. I was in the beauty salon they had set up especially for me in the 5-star hotel where the wedding would take place. My dress hung there, an elegant champagne model that I chose with such care. No white, no extravagant veils. At 55, I wanted something sophisticated and discreet that reflected who I really was. The makeup artist worked on my face while I looked in the mirror and saw a different woman than the one I was at 30 in my first marriage. My face had expression lines, marks of someone who has lived, suffered, and overcome. My hair, once totally brown, now had gray strands that I insisted on keeping. I was not ashamed of my age. On the contrary, every year lived was a conquest. My son Henry was downstairs welcoming the guests along with Richard. Henry was 32 years old and was always the center of my life. After I lost my first husband in a car accident, I dedicated myself completely to raising my son and managing my business. The import company I founded grew beyond my expectations. Today, we were leaders in the market with million-dollar contracts and a solid reputation. When I introduced Richard to Henry 6 months ago, I was happy about my son's reaction. He hugged Richard warmly and said he only wanted to see me happy. He said I deserved to start over, that I had spent too much time alone. Those words filled me with joy. Seeing my son support my new relationship seemed like the final blessing I needed to move on. Richard was 10 years younger than me. He was 45 and worked as a financial consultant. He knew a lot of people and had important contacts. He helped me expand the business, introduced me to investors, and opened doors I did not even know existed. He was charismatic, always well-dressed, with that smile that lit up any room. My heart, which I thought had forgotten how to love romantically, beat stronger again. As the makeup artist applied the final touch of blush, an idea popped into my head. I wanted to surprise Richard. I wanted to see him when he entered the bridal suite, observe his face before revealing myself. It would be an intimate moment, special just for us. I took my cell phone and sent a message to my assistant asking for the extra key card to the suite where we would spend our first night as husband and wife. She replied quickly, saying she would leave the card at the reception. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror. At 55, I could still be spontaneous and romantic. Life had not ended just because I had wrinkles and gray hair. I was alive in love and about to start a new chapter. When the makeup was ready, I gave the team a break for a few minutes, saying I needed a moment alone to compose myself. As soon as they left, I took my purse and slipped out discreetly through the side door of the salon. The hotel hallway was quiet. Most of the staff were busy preparing the ballroom on the ground floor. I took the elevator to the 10th floor where the presidential suite that Richard and I would use was located. My heart beat fast, not from nervousness, but from genuine joy. I felt like a teenager playing a prank. I passed the floor reception, took the card my assistant had left, and walked down the silent hallway to the door of Suite 1005. I held the card to the sensor, and the door opened with a soft click. The room was impeccable. The king-size bed covered with immaculate white sheets, red rose petals scattered artistically cold champagne in a silver bucket. Everything was perfect, exactly as I had planned. I looked around for the ideal place to hide. My dress was too voluminous to fit under the bed. The bathroom would be too obvious. My eyes stopped on the large built-in closet near the window. It was spacious with sliding doors that left a small crack when not completely closed. I opened the closet and saw it was empty except for some hangers and 2 white bathrobes hanging. There was enough space to fit inside without wrinkling my dress too much. I took a deep breath and went in, closing the sliding door almost completely, leaving only a small opening through which I could see the room. The light entering through the crack was enough to see the bed and the entrance door. I could see out, but it would be hard for anyone to see me inside. I leaned against the back wall of the closet and waited. My plan was simple. When Richard entered, I would come out and surprise him. I imagined his smile, the surprise in his eyes. It would be a special moment we would keep forever. The minutes passed slowly. I could hear my own heart beating in the silence of the room. The scent of roses filled the air. From where I was, I could see the reflection of the window in the vanity mirror. The sky outside was blue, cloudless. Everything conspired for this to be the perfect day. Suddenly, I heard steps in the hallway. They were heavy, masculine steps. My heart raced. Was it Richard? It was still 2 hours before the ceremony. Maybe he had come to check that everything was in order in the room. I smiled in the darkness of the closet, getting ready for the surprise moment. I heard the sound of the card swiping the sensor. The door opened and the footsteps entered. Through the crack, I saw a pair of men's shoes, but they were not the Italian loafers Richard always wore. They were casual, worn-out sneakers. I frowned, confused. Who could it be? Then I heard a voice that froze me completely. "I am here." "You took long enough." It was my son's voice. It was Henry. My mind panicked. What was Henry doing there? Why was he in the bridal suite? I held my breath, trying to understand. Maybe he had come to verify something for me. Maybe he wanted to ensure everything was perfect. But why that tone of voice? He seemed impatient, even irritated. The door opened again. Other steps entered. This time I recognized the shoes immediately. They were Richard's loafers. My fiancé was there with my son in the room where we would spend our first night together. "Sorry for the delay," Richard said. His voice was different. It was not the sweet and gentle tone he always used with me. It was cold and objective. "I had to get rid of your mother's annoying aunts." My mother. Was he talking about me? Calling me your mother to Henry? A chill ran down my spine. Something was very wrong. How much longer are we going to have to put up with this farce? Henry asked, and the contempt in his voice was unmistakable. I am tired of pretending I am happy with this ridiculous marriage. My legs almost failed. I held onto the closet wall, trying to process what I was hearing. Farce, ridiculous marriage. What was my son talking about? "Calm down," Richard replied, and I could hear him walking around the room. "Only a few more hours. After the ceremony, after she signs the papers for joint assets, the hard part will be over." My blood froze in my veins. Joint assets, community property. We had agreed on separate assets. I had insisted on it. Richard had agreed, saying his love for me had nothing to do with money. The papers my lawyer prepared clearly specified the separation of assets. "Are you sure she will sign without reading?" Henry asked. His voice sounded anxious now. "My mother is smart. She always reads everything before signing." Richard laughed. It was a low, cruel laugh I had never heard from him. "Your job was to create the perfect emotional environment. You did it very well, by the way. That speech at the engagement party about how you only wanted to see me happy, about how she deserved love again. Brilliant." She was so moved she did not even question when I suggested changing lawyers. My mind went back 3 weeks. Richard had suggested we use his lawyer to prepare the wedding documents, saying the man was a specialist in family law and would speed everything up. I, trusting and in love, agreed. I never imagined. And afterwards, Henry asked. After she signs, the silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. Every second seemed like an eternity. Afterwards, Richard said slowly, "We go on the honeymoon trip." That Caribbean cruise she wanted so much, water everywhere, many opportunities for accidents. No, that could not be happening. I must be having a nightmare. Maybe the wedding stress, the anxiety, all of that was making me hallucinate. But my son's voice cut any hope that this was a figment of my imagination. An accident at sea, Henry said, and there was a disturbing excitement in his tone. No body to investigate much. Perfect. Tears began to run down my face, silent and warm. My son. My own son was planning my death. The boy I raised, for whom I sacrificed everything, was conspiring to kill me. I learned from the best Richard continued, and I could hear him sitting on the bed. I already did it twice before. It works like a clock. Twice before. My stomach turned. Had he done this before? Had he killed other women? Tell me about them, Henry asked, and the morbid curiosity in his voice made me nauseous. Richard sighed as if he were recalling pleasant memories. The first was Martha, widow, 52 years old, owner of a pharmacy chain in Seattle. We got married after 8 months of dating honeymoon in Hawaii. She drowned during a dive. The instructor said she probably panicked when she saw a manta ray. Very tragic. He paused and I could hear him rummaging through something. I inherited everything. Her family even offered for me to keep managing the business. I stayed 6 months, enough time to sell everything quietly. I walked away with almost $10 million. $10 million. Was he talking about human lives as if they were business transactions? And the second Henry insisted, "Ah, Beatrice," Richard replied with a fake nostalgic sigh. "Construction businesswoman in Houston, 58 years old, widow too. She was a bit harder, very controlling, very involved in the business. It took me a year to earn her trust completely." "How did you do it? Private island in Greece? Private rental? Just the two of us?" She slipped off the rocks during a morning walk, hit her head and fell into the sea. They found the body 3 days later. The investigation concluded it was an accident. I was devastated. I cried at the funeral, the whole performance. Her family hugged me, consoled me. I inherited a 40% stake in the company. I sold everything in less than a year. I was shaking uncontrollably inside the closet. That man, that monster I had let into my life, into my bed, into my business, was a serial killer. And my son knew. Worse, my son was helping. And my mother is going to be the third. Henry said, and there was no emotion in his voice. It was like he was talking about the weather. "The best of all," confirmed Richard. "Her import empire is worth much more than the businesses of the other two combined. We are talking about at least $50 million in liquid assets, not counting properties and investments. With you as the sole heir and me as the widower entitled to half of everything through joint assets, we are going to split a fortune. $50 million. It was about that. I had built everything from scratch, worked 16 hours a day for years, and now I discovered that my own son saw all that effort only as money waiting to be stolen." "When are you going to transfer my share?" Henry asked. "Patience," Richard replied. "First we let the appropriate mourning pass. 6 months, maybe a year. Then I start selling the assets quietly. You will receive your half as agreed, $25 million, enough money so you never have to work again in your life." "I deserve it," Henry said bitterly. "I spent my whole life being the perfect son. I studied what she wanted. I worked in the company like a slave. I pretended interest in that boring import business, all to ensure that when she died, I would inherit everything. Every word was a stab in my heart. I had given everything for that boy. I paid for the best schools, the best university. I gave him an important position in the company, even when he showed little interest. I thought he just needed time to mature, that eventually he would fall in love with the business like me. You did the hardest part," Richard said, introducing me to her building trust, making her see me as the perfect son-in-law. "Your work was essential, perfect son-in-law." The pieces began to fit in my mind. It had been Henry who suggested I go to that charity event where I met Richard. Henry, who insisted that Richard was a good man, that I should give love a chance. Henry, who helped plan our first date, who was always there encouraging the relationship. It had all been a plan. From the beginning. "Are you sure there is no way they can trace this back to us?" Henry asked, sounding worried for the first time. "None," Richard guaranteed. "I am careful. I never use the same method twice. I never leave evidence. The 2 previous times there was not even a deep investigation. Older women, accidents during trips. It is a common pattern. The authorities do not even suspect. What if someone gets suspicious?" Of what Richard laughed. Of a loving husband who tragically lost his wife in an accident. Of a devoted son who is mourning his mother. "We are victims, Henry, and victims are not suspects." They continued talking about details. About how Richard would ensure I wore a defective life jacket during a boat ride. About how he had already bribed one of the cruise employees to testify that I was drinking a lot, that I was acting recklessly. About how Henry would stage the devastated son. Maybe he would even faint at the funeral to cause more commotion. I listened to everything inside that dark closet, my wedding dress wrinkled, my makeup running from tears. The woman who entered that room half an hour ago no longer existed. That Sarah, naive and in love, had died. In her place, another person was born, someone who had just lost everything she loved, but who would not lose her life. "We need to go down," Richard said finally. "The ceremony starts in an hour. Your mother must be wondering where you are. Let her worry." Henry replied with disdain. "Within a few months she will not worry about anything anymore." They laughed. They laughed at my planned death. They laughed at how foolish and trusting I was. They laughed at how easy it would be to fool me until the end. I heard steps moving away. The door opened and closed. Then silence. I stayed there standing, unable to move. My whole body was shaking. My legs were weak as if they were going to collapse at any moment. How much time did I spend there, I cannot say. It could have been 5 minutes or 30. Finally, with an immense effort, I pushed the closet door and came out. I stumbled to the bed and sat down, or rather I collapsed onto it. The rose petals stuck to my dress. The champagne was still cold in the bucket, indifferent to the tragedy that had just occurred in that room. I looked in the vanity mirror and saw my reflection. My eyes were red, the mascara running, forming black lines on my face. I looked like a ghost bride, a distorted version of that happy woman who was in the beauty salon an hour ago. My cell phone vibrated in the dress pocket. It was a message from Henry. "Mom, where are you? We are looking for you." We are. The ceremony starts in 45 minutes, followed by another from Richard. "My love, I am anxious to see you at the altar. I love you, I love you." Those words that previously filled me with joy now caused me physical repulsion. I had to get out of there. I had to think. But do what? If I simply canceled the wedding, they would know I discovered something. Richard could disappear, and I would have no proof of what I heard. He had done it before twice and got away with it. He was experienced, careful. And Henry, my son. How would I prove that my own son was trying to kill me? Who would believe me? I myself was having trouble believing it. I took my cell phone and with trembling hands opened the voice recording app. I looked at the time. 42 minutes. Everything had been recorded. Every word, every detail of the murderous plan. It was there in that small audio file. But would it be enough? Would it be admissible in court? And even if it were, what would happen? My son would go to prison. The boy I carried in my arms, who I taught to walk, who I consoled in every nightmare. Even after everything I heard, the part of me that was a mother felt a stabbing pain just thinking about it. I got up from the bed with difficulty. I needed to act, and I needed to act fast. I went to the suite's bathroom and looked at my reflection again, this time under the harsh light of the mirrors. I took a towel and carefully wiped the running mascara. I recomposed the makeup as best as I could with the products I had in my purse. My mind was working at maximum speed. I had 40 minutes to decide whether to destroy my own life by exposing my son or simply run away and leave everything behind. 40 minutes to choose between justice and motherhood. But then I remembered the other women, Martha and Beatrice. Did they have family children who cried for them, elderly parents who were deprived of saying goodbye to their daughters? And how many other women would be the next victims if I did nothing? Richard had turned this into a business. He was meticulous, patient, efficient. And now he had a partner in Henry, someone who could continue the work, perfect the method, find new victims. No, I could not let this happen. But I also could not simply go to the police at that moment. It was my word against theirs. And I knew how convincing Richard was. Hadn't he been the one who won me over completely in 6 months, who won the trust of my family, my friends, my partners? I needed a plan, and I needed to execute it now. I took my cell phone and sent a message to my private lawyer, Claire. Claire was a woman I had trusted for years. Absolute emergency. I need you at the hotel now, Suite 1005. Do not tell anyone. It is a matter of life or death. She replied in seconds. On my way. I arrive in 15 minutes. Then I sent another message, this time to Mark, my head of personal security, an ex-police officer who had worked with me for a decade. I need you at the presidential suite. Urgent. Come alone and discreetly. While I waited, I went to the laptop on the room's desk. It was my personal laptop that I had asked them to leave there to work during the honeymoon. I connected my cell phone and transferred the audio file to the computer, making 3 backups on different cloud services. Then I created a new document and started typing. I wrote everything I had heard, every detail, every word, the names of the previous victims, Martha and Beatrice, the methods used, the values mentioned. I wrote in affidavit format, dated and digitally signed. 15 minutes later, there was a discreet knock on the door. It was Claire. She entered quickly, closing the door behind her. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Sarah, what happened? Are you okay?" I signaled her to sit down and put headphones on her. "Listen to this, all of it." I played the audio. I saw her expression change as she listened, from confusion to shock, from shock to horror, from horror to contained fury. When it finished, she was pale. "My God," she whispered, "your son. And Richard. Sarah. We need to call the police now." "Not yet," I replied. My voice was surprisingly calm. "I need you to do something first. I need documents quickly." I explained my plan. Claire looked at me as if I were crazy, but then nodded slowly. "It is risky. Very risky." "I know. But it is the only way to ensure they do not escape. Richard did it before twice. He's careful. If we simply cancel the wedding now, he is going to disappear. And Henry will invent a story. He will say I am confused, maybe even question my sanity." Another knock on the door. It was Mark. I opened it and he entered, his military posture evident even in civilian clothes. When he heard the audio, his jaw tensed. "I can resolve this in other ways," he said quietly, and the tone in his voice made clear what kind of resolution he had in mind. "No," I replied firmly. "This has to be done the right way. Legal. They are going to pay for what they did, but within the law." I explained to both of them what my plan was. They tried to dissuade me. They argued it was too dangerous, that I was putting my life at risk, but I was determined. "Sarah," said Claire, taking my hands, "are you sure about this? Once we start, there is no going back." I looked at her then, at Mark. "My son planned to kill me. The man I loved is a serial killer. There is nothing to go back to here. There is only justice or death, and I am not going to die." They exchanged a look and then nodded. Claire started working on her laptop, preparing the documents I asked for. Mark made some discreet calls, organizing what would be necessary. I went back to the bathroom and completely recomposed my appearance. 30 minutes later, I looked like a radiant bride again. On the outside, at least. Inside, I was another person. A colder, harder, more determined person. I looked at Claire. Ready? She nodded, showing me the documents on her tablet. All ready. But Sarah, last chance to change your mind. I am not going to change, I replied. I digitally signed every document she prepared. I took my cell phone and sent a message to Henry. Sorry for the delay, darling. I was finishing some details. I am coming down now. To Richard. My love, see you at the altar in 10 minutes. I cannot wait. Mark escorted me discreetly to the service elevator. Claire went another way, carrying her laptop and a copy of everything. I had instructed her exactly what to do and when to do it. When I arrived at the hall where the ceremony would be, the music was already playing. My guests were all seated, beautifully dressed, smiling with expectation. Henry was next to Richard near the makeshift altar. My son saw me and smiled. It was a warm, perfect smile. He was good at that, he always was. How many times over the years had I misinterpreted his expressions? How many times did I confuse his manipulations with genuine love? Richard turned around when the bridal music started. His eyes lit up when he saw me. He brought his hand to his chest in a gesture that seemed moved, the perfect performance of the loving groom. I walked down the aisle alone. I did not have a father to give me away. He had passed away years ago. I always thought it would be Henry who would walk me to the altar, but he had politely declined, saying he preferred to stay by Richard's side as best man. Now I understood why. They wanted to be together, present, a united front. With every step I took, I felt the guests' gazes on me. 200 people who had no idea what was about to happen. 200 witnesses to what I was planning. I reached the altar. Richard extended his hand towards me. I took it. His hand was warm, firm. The hand of a killer. You look beautiful, he whispered. Thank you, I replied with a smile. The officiant, a justice of the peace Richard had suggested, began the ceremony. He spoke about love, commitment, partnership. Every word sounded like a cruel joke. I looked at Henry next to Richard. My son watched me with an expression I now recognized. It was not love, it was calculation. He was evaluating if I suspected anything, if there was any sign that I knew. I smiled at him, a proud mother's smile. I saw relief pass through his eyes. We arrive now at the exchange of vows the officiant announced. Richard, do you take Sarah to be your lawful wife? I do, said Richard, his voice clear and firm. Sarah, do you take Richard to be your lawful husband? This was the moment that would change everything. I looked at Richard, then at Henry, then at all the expectant faces around me. I have something to say. First, I spoke loudly and clearly. A murmur ran through the audience. Richard frowned, slightly confused, but still maintaining the smile. Sarah, he said quietly, is everything okay? Everything is perfect, I replied. Then I turned to the guests. You all came here today thinking you would attend a wedding. You were going to attend, but not the wedding you imagined. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear people breathing. Richard tried to hold my hand, but I pulled away. Sarah, you are nervous, he said, trying to look concerned. Let's take a break. You can... I am not nervous, I cut in. I am perfectly lucid, maybe more lucid than I have been in the last 6 months. Henry stepped forward. Mom, what is happening? Do you feel sick? Do not call me mother, I said, and my voice came out colder than I intended. I saw him recoil as if he had been slapped. I turned again to the guests. Today, about an hour ago, I was in the bridal suite hiding in the closet. I wanted to give a romantic surprise to my future husband. Richard turned pale. He understood immediately where this was going. But the person who appeared in the room was not just Richard. It was my son, too, and they did not know I was there, so they talked freely. Mom, I do not know what you are talking about, Henry began, but there was panic in his eyes. And I heard everything. I continued, my voice rising. I heard you planning my murder. I heard you laughing about how easy it would be to fool me. I heard about the other 2 women Richard killed before. The room erupted in exclamations of shock. People stood up. They started talking at the same time. Richard tried to grab me, but Mark appeared out of nowhere, stepping between us. "This is crazy," Richard shouted to the guests. "She is having a breakdown. She needs help." "I am having a breakdown," I repeated. "How interesting." "It is the same tactic you would use if I had survived the accident you were planning, isn't it?" Questioning my sanity, I took my cell phone from the bouquet of flowers one of the bridesmaids was holding, connected it to the room's sound system. "You are all going to hear exactly what I heard." I pressed play. Henry's voice filled the room. "I am here. You took long enough." Followed by Richard's, "Sorry for the delay. I had to get rid of your mother's annoying aunts." I saw Richard's face change color, from pale to red, from red to gray. Henry tried to run, but Mark held him by the arm. The audio continued playing, every word, every detail of the plan. The guests listened in absolute shock. Some women began to cry. Men clenched their fists. When the audio mentioned the previous victims, Martha and Beatrice, I saw two women in the audience stand up abruptly. I did not know them. They must be guests of Richard. "Martha was my sister," screamed one of them, tears streaming down her face. "She died 3 years ago. They said it was an accident." The other woman was shaking. "Beatrice was my business partner. She married a man named Robert Andrews, but that man she pointed at my fiancé looks exactly like him, just with a beard and different hair." Richard tried to leave, but Mark and 3 other guards I had instructed quietly before were already blocking the exits. "You do not understand," shouted Richard. "That recording is fake. It was manipulated. Sarah is obsessed. She... obsessed?" I laughed without humor. "You are right about one thing. I was obsessed. Obsessed with believing I had found love again. Obsessed with trusting my own son." I looked at Henry. He had collapsed in a chair, his face in his hands. Part of me, the part that was still a mother, wanted to run to him, hug him, ask why. But the part that had heard him laugh about my planned death stood firm. "Henry." I spoke loudly. "Look at me." He lifted his face. There were tears there, but I could not tell if they were genuine or just another manipulation. Why, I asked. "You are my son. I gave you everything." Why he stayed silent for a long moment. Then something changed in his expression. The mask fell completely. What remained was something cold, resentful. "Because I am tired," he said. "Tired of being the perfect son. Tired of working in that boring business. Tired of waiting for you to die naturally to finally have what is mine by right." Every word was a stab. "By right? You think you have the right to kill me. You were going to leave it all to me anyway," he replied with a shrug. "I am just speeding up the process and without having to pretend I care anymore." The people around us gasped. My best friend sitting in the front row began to sob loudly. At that moment, the doors of the hall opened. Police officers entered, led by a detective Claire had contacted. She had taken copies of the recording directly to the police while I stalled the ceremony. Richard Montes, also known as Richard Silva and Richard Mendez, announced the detective. "You are under arrest on suspicion of 2 homicides and conspiracy to commit murder." 2 officers handcuffed him. Richard tried to resist, screaming that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was crazy, that he was innocent, but the cuffs were already on his wrists. Henry Patterson continued the detective. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder." When the police approached Henry, something inside me broke. My son. My baby. I remembered when he was born, that little being I brought into the world. From the first day of school, from the nights I spent by his bed when he was sick. He looked at me while being handcuffed. "Are you really going to do this? Your own family?" "Did you stop being my family when you planned to kill me?" I replied. But my voice cracked at the end. They were taken away. Richard still screaming his innocence. Henry in silence, looking at the floor. The guests were in absolute shock. Some tried to console me, but I raised my hand, asking for space. Claire approached. "There are reporters outside. The news already leaked. You need to prepare yourself. I nodded. Let them in. I am going to give a statement. Sarah, are you sure you do not have to do this now? I just discovered my son and my fiancé wanted to kill me. I completed. Yes, I am aware. And yes, I am going to speak. I walked out of the hall. The camera flashes were blinding. Microphones were shoved towards me. Questions shouted from all sides. I raised my hand and the tumult subsided. My name is Sarah Patterson. I began. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I discovered that the two people I trusted most planned to murder me for money. I paused, letting that sink in. But I am not going to be a victim. I am not going to be just another name on a list of women who were manipulated and murdered. I am going to use every resource I have, every contact, every penny to ensure justice is done. A reporter shouted, Mrs. Patterson, how do you feel about your son? I took a deep breath. I am devastated. As a mother, I am completely devastated. But as a woman, as a human being, I am furious. And the fury is going to overcome the pain, at least long enough to do what has to be done. Another reporter, are you going to sue? I am going to do more than sue. I interrupted. I am going to make sure every victim of Richard is recognized. Martha and Beatrice are not going to be forgotten as simple accidents, and I am going to use my story as a warning. Women, especially older women, are seen as easy targets. Well, I am not easy, and I am not going to let others be treated like that. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The story spread like wildfire through the national media. 55-year-old bride exposes murder plot at the altar was in all the headlines. TV shows looked for me. True crime podcasts wanted interviews. Journalists camped at the door of my house in the suburbs. I gave some carefully selected interviews. Every time I told the story, it became easier. Not the pain, but the narrative. I was transforming my trauma into something useful, into a message. The police investigation advanced quickly. With the recording I provided and the testimony of Martha and Beatrice's families, they got a full search warrant for Richard's house. What they found there was terrifying. There was a computer with detailed files on not 2, but 5 women. Martha and Beatrice were the ones he had mentioned, but there were 3 others in different cities, all dead in accidents in the last 10 years. Each one left Richard as the beneficiary of large life insurance policies or heir to properties. There was also a folder about me. It contained everything: my schedules, my usual routes, details about my health, my medications, my preferences. He had studied every aspect of my life with the meticulousness of a predator, studying his prey. And most disturbing there were notes about other women, potential future victims, all successful widows, all in the 50 to 60 age range, all with significant assets. The prosecutor called me. They had enough evidence to charge Richard with 5 homicides, not just 2. With my recording and the testimony I would give, they had a solid case. But there was a problem. Henry. Technically explained, the prosecutor, a rigorous woman named Susan. Your son can claim he was coerced, that he was afraid of Richard, that he was only cooperating to save his own life. But the recording, I protested. He was clearly participating voluntarily. He was excited about it. I know, and we are going to use that. But a good defense lawyer can create reasonable doubt. He is young. He can say he was manipulated by an older, experienced man. The idea that Henry would escape full punishment infuriated me. What do you need from me? Your testimony will be crucial, but also, Sarah, I need you to be prepared. The defense is going to try to destroy you on the witness stand. They are going to question your mental stability, your motivations. They are going to suggest you manipulated the recording, that you are taking revenge on a son who disappointed you. Let them try, I replied. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. Meanwhile, the media remained frantic. They discovered the identities of Richard's other 3 victims. Families who had mourned, loved ones lost in tragic accidents, now discovered they were planned murders. One of those families contacted me. The daughter of one of the victims, a woman named Patricia, came to my office. My mother, she said with tears in her eyes, died in a fire 7 years ago in Portland. They said it was a short circuit, but I always knew there was something weird. She was so careful, so meticulous. I held her hand. I am so sorry. For you and for her. Thanks to you, Patricia said. Finally, we are going to have answers. Finally, we can process the grief for real, knowing the truth. That conversation changed something in me. I was not doing this just for me. I was doing it for Martha Beatrice, for Patricia's mother, and for the other women Richard had turned into statistics. Meanwhile, Henry was in prison awaiting trial. His lawyer tried to negotiate. They wanted him to testify against Richard in exchange for a reduced sentence. The prosecutor called me to discuss. It is a good offer. With his testimony, we ensure Richard never gets out of prison again. And Henry, he would probably receive between 5 to 10 years with the possibility of parole. 5 to 10 years for conspiring to kill me, for laughing about my planned death. No, I said, he does not negotiate. He goes to trial like Richard. Sarah, I understand your anger, but it is not about anger, I interrupted. It is about justice. If we let him make a deal, we send the message that conspiring to kill your own mother for money is something that can be negotiated. It is not. The prosecutor stayed silent for a moment. Are you sure the trial is going to be brutal? For you, I know. But I am going to be there, and I am going to testify. Henry tried to contact me several times. Letters, messages through his lawyer, requests for visits. I ignored them all. I had nothing to say to him, or rather everything I had to say I would say in court. His paternal grandmother, my ex-mother-in-law, came to see me. She was devastated. Sarah, she cried, he is my grandson, my only grandson. Please, can't you? He planned to kill me, I said gently but firmly. He laughed about it. If you heard the recording. I heard it. She admitted, wiping her tears. The police showed me, but he is a boy. He was influenced. He is 32 years old. He is not a boy, and no one influenced him to wish for my death. That came from him. She left crying. I felt sorry for her. She was innocent in all this, just a grandmother who loved her grandson. But I could not let that change my decision. The months passed slowly. I immersed myself in work using the company as a distraction. Ironically, business had never been better. The publicity, although tragic, had put my name in the spotlight. New contracts appeared. Investors approached. I used part of the profits to create a foundation, Justice for Her, dedicated to helping families of women who died in suspicious circumstances get proper investigations. I hired private investigators. Lawyers offered resources for those who could not pay. Martha Beatrice and Richard's other 3 victims became the first posthumous beneficiaries. Their stories were told, their deaths reinvestigated properly, their memories honored. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was full. Media from all over the country was there. The victims' families sitting together in solidarity, my friends and employees supporting me, and there at the front, separated by guards, were Richard and Henry. Richard seemed different, smaller somehow. The confidence he always exuded had disappeared. His shoulders were hunched, his face pale. Henry looked at me when I entered. He tried to smile, that smile he always used when he wanted something from me. I looked away. The judge entered and the trial began. The prosecutor presented the case methodically. The recording was played for the jury. I saw their expressions change from neutral to shocked, from shocked to disgusted. Then they called the first witness me. I stood up and walked to the witness stand. I put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth, nothing but the truth. The prosecutor started with basic questions. My name, age, profession. How did I meet Richard? How long were we dating? I answered everything calmly, clearly. Then we arrived at the day of the near wedding. Can you tell us in your own words what happened that day? I took a deep breath. I was happy. I was about to marry a man I loved, or at least thought I loved. I decided to give him a romantic surprise. I wanted to hide in the bridal suite and surprise him when he entered. And what happened when you were hidden? I heard footsteps. I thought it was Richard, but I recognized my son, Henry's voice. I was surprised. I did not understand what he would be doing there. Then Richard entered too. And did they know you were there? No. I was hidden in the closet. They thought they were alone. What did they talk about? I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words return. Henry asked how much longer they would have to put up with the farce. Richard said only a few more hours until I signed the wedding papers. What papers? I discovered later, that Richard had changed the separation of assets, documents I had agreed on for joint assets. Documents. He planned for me to sign without reading during the ceremony being moved. The prosecutor nodded, and then they started talking about killing me. My voice failed a little. About an accident during the honeymoon. Richard mentioned he had done it before with other women, Martha and Beatrice. How did you feel hearing that? Like my world was falling apart, I admitted. The man I loved was planning to kill me. And worse, much worse, was that my son was helping. My own son, who I raised, who I loved, was actively participating in the plan. Tears began to flow, but I did not wipe them. I let the jury see my pain. And what did Henry say during that conversation? He said he was tired of pretending to be the perfect son, that he wanted the money that would be his anyway. He asked when he would receive his share of the $50 million. I heard murmurs in the courtroom. The judge banged the gavel, asking for silence. $50 million refers to my net worth, the approximate value of everything I built during my life. They were dividing my money before even killing me. The prosecutor made me repeat specific parts of the conversation. Every word I spoke was confirmed by the recording they had as evidence. Then it was time for the defense to cross-examine me. Richard's lawyer stood up. He was a middle-aged man, expensive suit, condescending expression. "Mrs. Patterson," he began, "don't you think it is too convenient that you recorded that entire conversation I did not plan to record?" I replied. My cell phone was in the dress pocket with the recording app open because I had used it to record some messages for Richard earlier. It continued recording without me realizing. "Ah, what luck," he said sarcastically. "And you, an experienced businesswoman, want us to believe you did not notice you were recording. I was hiding in a closet, hearing my son and my fiancé plan to kill me," I replied firmly. "I was not exactly worried about my cell phone. Or maybe he suggested you were staging all this. Maybe you were angry because your son did not approve of that marriage. Maybe you wanted revenge." "My son appeared to approve the marriage completely," I replied. "And why would I invent that my own son wants to kill me?" "Money," he said simply. "With your son in prison, you keep total control over your assets. No one to share, no one to question your decisions." I laughed. It was a short, bitter laugh. My son would have already inherited everything when I died. Naturally, he did not need to kill me for that. I gained nothing from this situation except the loss of the son I loved. The lawyer tried some other approaches, suggesting I was mentally unstable, that the recording could have been edited, that maybe I had misinterpreted a harmless conversation. But the prosecutor objected every time, and the judge sustained. The recording was too clear. It had been verified by experts as authentic. Then it was Henry's lawyer's turn. He was younger, seemed less cynical. His approach was different. "Mrs. Patterson," he said gently, "do you love your son?" The question took me off guard. I loved in the past. "You don't love anymore." "I do not know what I feel," I admitted. "He is my son. He always will be. But he planned to kill me." "How do I reconcile those two things?" "Exactly," said the lawyer. "How does a son plan to kill his own mother? Wouldn't some kind of coercion manipulation be necessary?" "Objection," said the prosecutor. "Speculation." "I rephrase," said the lawyer. "Mrs. Patterson in the recording who initiated the conversation about murder. Who brought up the subject first, I thought again. Richard. And Richard is how many years older than Henry? 13 years. More experienced, more manipulative. You yourself were deceived by him, weren't you? I was, I admitted reluctantly. So isn't it possible that Henry, a 32-year-old young man, was also manipulated, that Richard planted those ideas in his head? No, I replied firmly, because in the recording, Henry does not sound coerced. He sounds excited. He laughed. He asked when he would receive the money. Those are not actions of someone being forced. But he is your son, insisted the lawyer. Certainly there must be. He stopped being my son when he agreed to my murder, I said, and my voice echoed through the courtroom. I would have given him everything, literally everything. He just needed to wait. But no, he wanted it now and was willing to kill me to get it. I saw Henry lower his head. The interrogation continued for hours. They made me repeat the story several times looking for inconsistencies. They did not find them because I did not know it. I was telling the truth. When they finally released me from the witness stand, I was exhausted. But there were more witnesses. Martha and Beatrice's families testified about the suspicious circumstances of the deaths. Experts spoke about the methods used, about how the accidents were carefully planned. And then the prosecution brought their surprise witness. It was a woman I had never seen. She was about 50 years old, pretty well dressed. When she was called to the stand, Richard turned white. "Please state your name for the court," asked the prosecutor. "My name is Danielle Fields," said the woman, "and I was going to be Richard's next victim." The court exploded. The judge had to bang the gavel several times to restore order. Danielle told her story. How she met Richard at a golf club 6 months before he met me. How he was charming, attentive, perfect. How he asked her to marry him and she accepted. But then she said, "I found some documents in his house about other women and started to get suspicious." "What did you do?" "I hired a private investigator. He discovered that Richard had several names, several identities. When I confronted Richard, he disappeared. He simply vanished. I never saw him again until seeing his photo in the newspapers arrested for the murder of several women." Danielle's testimony was devastating for the defense. She had documents, emails, everything proving Richard had tried the same scheme with her. She had escaped only by being suspicious enough to investigate. The defense tried to discredit her, suggesting she was looking for her 15 minutes of fame, but she had evidence too solid. Then it was Richard and Henry's turn to testify. Richard took the stand first. He tried to seem calm, serene, but you could see the sweat on his forehead. His lawyer guided him through a carefully constructed narrative. Richard claimed everything was a misunderstanding, that the conversation I heard was taken out of context, that he and Henry were just joking about absurd scenarios, not actually planning anything. Joking, repeated the prosecutor when her turn came to cross-examine. "You were joking about killing Sarah Patterson." "It was a type of dark humor," said Richard. Henry and I developed that kind of friendship. We made jokes about everything." "Jokes," repeated the prosecutor. "And the other women, Martha, Beatrice, the other 3 were. They also jokes. I did not kill anyone," said Richard firmly. "Those were all real tragedies, real accidents. You are trying to turn me into some kind of serial killer when I am just an unlucky man who lost people he loved." "Bad luck," murmured the prosecutor. "Mr. Montes, or should I call you Silva or Mendez, how many fake names have you used?" "I changed my name legally a few times," he admitted, "for personal reasons. Personal reasons like fleeing investigations. Objection sustained. Rephrase prosecutor. She changed tactics. Sir, in the recording, you mentioned specific amounts. 50 million. You mentioned dividing Sarah's assets. How do you explain that if it was just a joke, we were speculating about hypothetically if something happened to Sarah? Convenient. And do you always speculate about the death of your fiancés?" The questions continued incisive, relentless. Richard tried to maintain his story, but the prosecutor dismantled him piece by piece. Every answer of his created more contradictions. Finally, he left the stand looking defeated. Then it was Henry's turn. My son went up to the stand slowly. He looked much younger than his 32 years, almost fragile. I knew it was his lawyer's strategy, but I still felt something tighten in my chest. His lawyer guided him gently. Henry claimed he was manipulated by Richard, that he was afraid, that Richard threatened him. He said if he did not cooperate, he himself would be murdered. But in the recording, said the prosecutor when her turn came, "You do not sound afraid, you sound excited." "I was trying to seem cooperative," said Henry. "So Richard would not suspect I might report him. So you planned to report him, yes, eventually. But you did not even warn your mother about the danger." "I was afraid," repeated Henry. "Richard is dangerous, but not dangerous enough to stop you from asking when you would receive your 25 million. Right." Henry blinked. I was just playing his game." The prosecutor pulled out a document. "Mr. Patterson, you opened an offshore account 3 weeks before the planned wedding." "What for?" He hesitated. Investments. Investments. Would it not be to receive the money you expected to earn with your mother's death? "No, I never planned to receive the money. But you yourself said in the recording that you deserved that money, that you had spent your life being the perfect son." Henry looked at me, his eyes pleading. I did not look away, but I did not show any emotion either. "Do you love your mother?" asked the prosecutor suddenly. The question took him by surprise. Yes, I love. Curious way of showing love. Planning murder. I did not plan anything. It was all Richard. But you agreed. You laughed. You asked about your share of the money. "Why were you afraid?" Fear repeated the prosecutor. "Mr. Patterson, how many times could you have reported Richard? How many opportunities did you have to warn your mother? Silence. You had the police's phone number. You had access to your mother at any time. You could have sent an anonymous message, a call, anything. But you did not. Do you know why Because you wanted the money. Simple as that. You saw your mother as an obstacle between you and the wealth you thought you deserved. That is not true." "Then look at your mother now," ordered the prosecutor. "Look her in the eyes and say you did not want her to die." Henry looked at me. I stared back, my face a neutral mask. He began, but nothing else came out. Tears began to stream down his face. "I am so sorry," he whispered. "Mom, I am so sorry." "You are sorry for what?" asked the prosecutor. "For planning to kill your mother or for getting caught?" He did not answer. He just continued crying. When they finally dismissed him, he passed by me stumbling. He tried to touch me, but a guard stopped him. Closing arguments began the next day. The defense argued that Richard was an innocent man, persecuted by circumstances, that the previous deaths were truly accidents, that the recording was being misinterpreted. For Henry, they argued he was a victim of manipulation, a scared young man coerced by an older, dangerous man. The prosecution painted a different picture of a calculating, experienced predator who turned murder into a lucrative business, and of a greedy son willing to kill his own mother for money. Sarah Patterson said the prosecutor in her closing argument is a survivor. She could have died at sea, another tragic victim of an accident, but by pure luck, by having decided to make a romantic surprise, she heard the truth. And she was brave enough not only to save her own life, but to bring justice for Martha Beatrice and all the others she pointed to Richard and Henry. These men saw successful women not as people, but as sources of income, as targets. They planned meticulously, executed coldly, and would have continued if Sarah had not exposed them. The jury went out to deliberate. It was 3 days of waiting, 3 days where I could barely eat or sleep. I spent the nights reliving every moment, every word of the recording, every look from Henry during the trial. Finally, the verdict came. The courtroom was full again. I sat in the front row, Claire on one side, Mark on the other. In the case of the state versus Richard Montes, began the jury foreman. For the crime of first-degree murder of Martha Sanders, we find the defendant guilty. I heard gasps behind me, Martha's sister crying. The foreman continued, guilty of first-degree murder of Beatrice Lima, guilty of 3 other homicide charges, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder against me. Richard remained motionless while every verdict was read. In the case of the state versus Henry Patterson, continued the foreman, for the crime of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. I felt something break inside me. Even expecting, even wanting justice, hearing my son declared guilty was like getting shot in the chest. Henry collapsed on the table, sobbing. His lawyer tried to comfort him, but there was no comfort for that. The sentence came 2 weeks later. Richard received 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He would die in prison. When the sentence was read, he did not even react. He just stared straight ahead as if he were already dead. Henry received 25 years with the possibility of parole after 15. The judge was harsh in his words. Mr. Patterson, he said, you betrayed the most sacred trust that exists, the trust between mother and son. You not only planned to take the life of the woman who gave you life, but you did it out of pure greed. I hope you use your time in prison to reflect on the magnitude of what you tried to do. When it was over, when the guards took them away, Henry looked at me one last time. Mom, he said, his voice cracking. Can you forgive me someday? I looked at him, at that man who was once my baby. I do not know, I answered honestly. Ask me in 15 years. It was the last time I spoke to him. The following months were of rebuilding. The media eventually moved on, finding new stories. The foundation I created continued to grow, helping more and more families. Martha and Beatrice's families and the other victims became part of my life. We met periodically, sharing memories of those we lost, ensuring they were never forgotten. I sold the company. I could no longer work there, not when every corner reminded me of Henry, of how I thought we were building something together. I sold for a fair value and used the money to expand the foundation. I moved house, too. I could no longer live in the place where I raised my son, where every room held memories of him. I bought a smaller, simpler apartment in a historic neighborhood. I started over. Therapy helped. It was months of painful sessions unpacking every layer of betrayal, pain, guilt. Yes, guilt. Because as much as I knew rationally it was not my fault, part of me kept asking, where did I go wrong? When did my son turn into someone capable of planning my murder? You did not go wrong, my therapist repeated. Some people simply make bad choices, cruel choices, and that is not a reflection of you as a mother. But it took time to accept that. A year after the trial, I received a letter. It was from Henry. I stared at the envelope for days before having the courage to open it. When I finally opened it, I found pages and pages of his handwriting, that same handwriting I saw in Mother's Day cards, in affectionate notes and childhood drawings. He apologized. He said he understood if I never forgave him, that he was in therapy in prison trying to understand why he did what he did, that greed, resentment, envy had poisoned his heart little by little, year after year. I saw you working so hard, he wrote, building that empire. And I started to feel as if it were mine by right, as if you owed me that. I forgot you owed me nothing. That everything you did was out of love, not obligation. He spoke about Richard, about how he was seduced by the idea of quick wealth, how Richard fed his resentment, validated his greed, transformed it into a concrete plan. But I cannot blame only him, he wrote. It was me who chose to listen. It was me who agreed. It was me who laughed about your death. And I am going to carry that the rest of my life. He ended by saying he did not expect a reply, that he did not expect forgiveness, that he only wanted me to know he was trying to be a better person. I put the letter away. I did not reply. I was not ready yet. 2 years passed, then 3. I went to therapy, traveled, met new people. I learned to trust again, slowly. I made new friends, cultivated new hobbies. I discovered who Sarah was without being Henry's mother, without being the CEO of a company. And I learned something important. I was strong, stronger than I ever imagined. I had survived the ultimate betrayal. I had stayed hidden in a closet hearing my son plan my murder. And not only did I survive, but I fought. I had exposed 2 criminals, brought justice to forgotten victims, transformed my tragedy into something that helped other people. At 58, I was no longer that naive woman who hid in the closet hoping to surprise her fiancé. I was someone who knew the darkest side of humanity and chose not to become cynical. Someone who was betrayed by her own family and chose to continue loving only with more care. On my 59th birthday, I did something I had not done in 3 years. I went to visit Henry. He had changed. He was thinner, older than his 35 years should look. But there was something different in his eyes, something that could be genuine remorse. We sat separated by the glass phones to our ears. "Hello, Mom," he said, and his voice was hoarse. "Hello, Henry," I replied. We stayed silent for a long moment. "Thank you for coming," he said finally. I did not expect it. "Neither did I admitted. I do not know why I came, maybe to see if you really changed, or maybe to see if I changed enough to sit here without hating you." "And did you change?" I thought about it. "I do not hate you not anymore. But I also do not know if I can love you like before. That Henry, the son I loved, died in that hotel room. You are another person now, and so am I." Tears streamed down his face. "I know, and I do not expect you to love me. I only hope that one day maybe you can see me as a human being who made a terrible mistake and is trying to be better. Killing your mother is not a mistake, Henry. It is a choice. You are right. It was a choice. The worst I have ever made. We talked for 40 minutes. It was not a reconciliation. It was not forgiveness. It was just 2 strangers who once were mother and son trying to find some kind of peace. When I got up to leave, he asked, "Are you coming back? I do not know," I answered honestly. "Maybe someday. But do not wait. Do not put your redemption in my hands. That is your journey." I left the prison and drove home as the sun set, and I realized something. I was at peace. Not complete peace, not a peace without scars, but peace nonetheless. Today at 60, I look back and see my life in 3 parts. Before that day in the hotel room during those terrible months of investigation and trial, and after the rebuilding. The Justice for Her Foundation helped more than 50 families get proper investigations into suspicious deaths. 3 cases resulted in arrests. 20 families finally managed to bury their loved ones knowing the truth. I wrote a book about my experience. The money all went to the foundation. I give lectures on red flags in relationships, on how predators choose their victims, on the importance of trusting your instincts. And yes, eventually, I learned to trust again. I met good people. I formed new friendships. I even went on a few casual dates. Nothing serious. Maybe it never will be. But that is okay, because I learned that I do not need another person to complete me. I am complete alone, strong alone, alive, very alive alone. Sometimes at night, I still think about that moment in the closet, about Richard and Henry's voices planning my death, and I give thanks. I give thanks for having decided to make that silly surprise. I give thanks for having heard the truth, however painful it was, because the truth saved me. The truth set me free, and the truth gave me the chance to start over. At 60, I am starting over, and this time I am doing it right. Now, if you like this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments which part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I do not publish here. I will wait for you there.